Speaking with Berna Fidan.
Mick Rooney, investigative journalist. You're very welcome to episode 36 of Radio Espial, www.radioespial.com if you're interested in visiting the website. As you will have seen from the thumbnail and the title, it's another full timeline for you. Case of Esra Uyrun. This case is set in Ireland, and just before we commence the case summary, thank you to all the recent subscribers to the channel. You're all very welcome if you're new here. As always, let's get straight on with it. The 23rd of February 2011, 38-year-old Esra Uyrun leaves her home in Clondalkin, Dublin, Ireland, in the small family car. It's around 7:20 a.m. and she has told her husband Ozgur that she is just popping out briefly to pick up milk and some bits and pieces for the day at the local early opening shop in nearby Nielstown. Her husband is busy getting ready for work and also looking after their 2.5-year-old son. He's decided to visit the gym today and will take the car. Most often, Esra takes him to work and picks him up when he finishes later in the day. It's a cool to somewhat chilly day and it's cloudy, and Esra wants to make sure she has everything and won't have to go out without the car, and obviously with her 2.5-year-old son. The couple have been living in Dublin for almost 4 years since Ozgur secured a better paid job and they moved to Ireland from London. Originally, both are of Turkish heritage and met in the UK. That's where their families, both of their families, still live. Esra Uyrun was born into a Turkish family in London in 1972. When she lived in London, she worked for a time in a pathology lab in a hospital, and it was there that she met her future husband, Ozgur. By the time they had moved to Dublin to start a new life, both worked for Sporting Bet in Park West, not far from Clondalkin, where they would eventually settle and create their home. By 2008, the couple were looking forward to the birth of their first child. They decided that now Ozgur was in a better job, Esra would become a stay-at-home mum. But on the 23rd of February 2011, Esra told her husband she was just driving to the local shop in Nielstown, just minutes away, and would be back very shortly to give him the car so he could go to work. Esra vanished that day, and after 12 years has never been seen since. We're going to go to the timeline. As always, Kieran O'Connell from the Facebook page Irish Cold Cases and the website Ireland's Vanishing Triangle will be joining us to give us his thoughts on this case. So let's go straight to the timeline. Okay, Kieran is with us now. Kieran, there's a lot in this case of Esra Uyrun, isn't it?
Yeah, hi Mick. Thanks for having me back. Hope all is well with you and everything. Yeah, it's an interesting case, this one. Like thankfully, so to speak, it's a more recent case, so like there is a bit of mobile data and some CCTV. Now it is 2011, so not as much CCTV as there would be like these days, but and like to me, like I remember the case at the time unfolding on the news and all, and there was only ever really, to me now, kind of two possible outcomes with Ezra's case. Although unfortunately, as Ezra hasn't been found, I suppose there's like it leaves it open that there could be other possibilities. And you're right, there is a lot to discuss with this
Oh
case.
wow, there is, yeah. So with that in mind, let's push on.
Excellent.
I've already given you the summary of the case, but maybe just a little bit more background. Um, as with all these cases, a simple summary is never going to give the crucial details of any case. This one's no different. So let's go back to the beginning before we get into the day-to-day and hour-by-hour timeline. Ezra and husband Ozgur came to Ireland around 2007-2008. By that time, both were working for Sporting Bet in Park West, South Dublin. Ozgur had secured a better position, a management role, and a relocation package to move to Dublin with his wife. The couple were starting a new life, and both their extended families, their parents, siblings, lived in the UK. Of Turkish heritage, Ezra had a distinctive British London accent, having been born in the family home there. For a short few months, they both were actually living at the Aspect Hotel in Park West, Dublin, as part of Ozgur's company relocation package. And just to give you some sense, that is the actual hotel. But soon they secured a house in Collinstown Grove, Clondalkin, and their family grew to include a newborn son, Eamon. With the birth, Ezra gave up work at Sporting Bet, her Sporting Bet job, and became a stay-at-home mum. She joined the local mothers and toddlers group in Clondalkin and pretty much soon became well known and recognised and liked in her neighbourhood. Now, in an awful lot of cases, you're seeing there from that image, I don't include the actual image of the victim or the missing person's house. In this case, I will, for the simple reason that the family no longer live there. Ezra retained her passion for fashion and design and was also known to visit the local charity shop for garments and use this fabric for new design projects to keep busy. Life was good with Em and her son getting older. The couple developed a general routine. Eamon was no longer a toddler. He was 2.5 years of age. And Ezra still took regular visits back to London to her family. However, both Ezra's parents in London were not in great health. Her father had suffered a stroke as far back as his 50s. His condition was deteriorating by 2010. All the family and siblings prepared themselves for the inevitable. Her older sister Berna in London has always been clear. It was a difficult family time, and Ezra's father's passing away in October 2010 was difficult. Understandably, she travelled a lot back to London, always fearing the end of one visit might be the last time she ever saw her father when returning to her home in Dublin. Now, in this Podimo podcast interview coming up, the people you hear speak is the host, Pandora Sykes, and she's talking to Berna Fiden, the elder sister of Ezra. Berna did state that Ezra had struggled with the transition to Ireland initially, and family connections to her Turkish origins were very important to her. She did reveal that Ezra had discussed with her husband, Ozgur, perhaps relocating back to London, and he had requested a job transfer if a position became available. So let's take a listen to that Podimo extract.
At first, Esra didn't want to go because she didn't want to leave family behind. So she was quite reluctant to go. But then again, it was like, it might be good for our future.
After the couple arrived in Ireland, Ezra worked as an administrator in the same company as Ozgur, though her mind was never far away from her friends back in England.
It wasn't the ideal job that she liked, but it was just to keep her busy, because what can you do there when you're on your own? She'd be on the phone to us, we would phone her, she would phone us, she would phone her friends. Literally every single day she would be on the phone to somebody. She wasn't 100% happy in Ireland because she was away from family. She kept on saying to her husband, you need to get a transfer back to London. And he said, well, I've put a transfer request in. When that position's available, then we'll move back.
In January, Ezra had invited her mother to visit her home in Clondalkin, Dublin, Ireland, and she would be happy that if that was anything up to a month. She paid and organised the air tickets, and after exchanges with her mother, who was an uncomfortable traveller, Ezra suggested she come with Ozgur's mother as well. They all agreed. It was going to be a busy February. Esra began busying herself for the visit. She would ultimately plan and book spa and restaurant visits for the last week in February. It was the perfect occasion. Her birthday was March the 5th, so literally a week further on. It was all arranged. Both mothers would fly in from London to Dublin on the morning of February the 24th. That would have been the Thursday. Now let's just flip back to February the 20th, which was the Sunday. Esra calls her sister Berna on Sunday to ask her to send some spices to Dublin so she can have everything for her mother's trip. It's the last time Berna will directly speak to her sister before the disappearance. This was about Esra couldn't get very particular Turkish spices and was asking Berna to send them, to post them through to her. February the 22nd, Tuesday. A neighbour chats with Esra on Collinstown Grove, Clondalkin. Esra explains that she had a busy week and she was doing a bit of spring cleaning while filling a wheelie bin. A wheelie bin, for anybody in beyond the UK and Europe, it's obviously it's a rubbish bin. She tells the neighbour that she's looking forward to the visit of her mother and mother-in-law on the Thursday. So we're now on to February the 23rd, Wednesday. This is the day of the disappearance. Now, I'm aware that within Gardaí files, the Irish police, there's a witness report that neighbours, a couple through a window that morning, do see Esra getting into her car sometime after 7 a.m, but they're not quite sure exactly when. Both are familiar with Esra's routine, but this witness statement has never been made public by Gardaí. Later, on February the 23rd, we're at 7 a.m. Ozgur Uyrun will later state to Gardaí that this morning was normal and the couple got up around 7 a.m. Ozgur said he wanted to have the car for the day and that he would go to the gym after work. The couple shared the one car they had, and more often Esra would take Ozgur to work around 8 a.m. and then collect him after work when he finished. The odd day he would take the car himself if he wanted to go to the gym. 7:15 to 7:20 a.m. On learning that Ozgur wants the car for the day, Esra says she will need to pop into the local shop and pick up milk and some other bits and pieces and won't be too long. He readies for work while he's also looking after his son, Emin. Kieran, do you want to come in on that in there?
No, it just seems quite a normal day, but the thing I would be wondering about, if the couple like across the way would see her regularly going out of her house at 7 a.m, can they really be sure what day they saw her on?
No.
Not to discredit them, but you can never be, like, you're seeing that every day.
No. I think we often say that as well about eyewitnesses who, when later interviewed by Gardaí and are recollecting circumstances in cases, and they say, no, I'm certain I saw her or him at that time, and they're being completely truthful. The problem is they may have mistaken their days, because they're being asked in retrospective, maybe days or weeks later, and that's always the problem.
When they were asked.
Yeah, if there was something that they witnessed or something happened that particular day, that sometimes does better to tie in. Yeah, okay, that must have been definitely that day. It was Christmas Day, or it was New Year's Day, or that was the day that the council were digging up the road. Fine, Gardaí, go and check. Were you digging up that road on that morning? You know, then you've got a fix. You've got something to say. Okay, guys, we really need to pay attention here. This definitely sounds like it's a legitimate witness eye report. Okay, so 7:50 a.m. What is known locally as the Power City roundabout Clondalkin. The couple's Renault Twingo is tracked by plate recognition. That's a system they have in Ireland for recognising traffic as it moves along. This location is just 4 minutes drive from their home at Collinstown Grove, but the car does not appear to be moving back toward the home, rather moving in the lane and in a direction beyond Clondalkin out to the motorway. This image here, I know it's small, but just generally the really only point you need to focus on is here, this red where it says Power City. That's close to the roundabout. It's called the Power City roundabout because Power City, which is an electronics firm and retail outlet, is located there. So locals refer to it as the Power City roundabout. Down here to the bottom right is Collinstown, where Collinstown Avenue, Collinstown Park, Collinstown Grove is located. And across here, right to the centre bottom, is Nielstown. Nielstown is the local row of shops. I think there were about 8 shops there at the time. And there was an early morning shop that opened, I believe, around 6 or 7 a.m. So,
fairly close to each other
yeah,
anyway.
Ezra travelled in the
far.
car to the Nielstown row of shops, and then she was expected to head back to Collinstown Grove. Again, a journey that really shouldn't have taken her any more than 10 minutes at most in the car. Really, the time itself was the time she would have spent within the little small supermarket shop. But instead, at 7:50, up here at the Power City roundabout, way up here, her car is spotted. Now, I say way up here, but that's still only about a 6 or 7 minute drive at most. And that's even if you're going to circumnavigate from Nielstown to Collinstown, back to Nielstown, and then maybe you take an alternative route and you go up towards the Power City roundabout. All of that is still going to be within the realm of, 10, 15 minutes. It's not going to take 40 to 45 minutes from 7:15, 7:20 to 7:50 a.m. So at 8 a.m, Ozgur should be leaving for work, but his wife hasn't returned yet, so he can't. It's a school midterm break, and at least the local roads should be lighter with traffic. Now, this is not pertaining to their son, who's only 2.5 years of age, but rather that just in general, traffic wouldn't be as heavy. Now, at 8:30 to 8:40 a.m, CCTV footage captures a Renault Twingo car coming down Bray Strand. The driving of the car is erratic, and there's a near collision with a Skoda Octavia already on the Strand Road in Bray. When Ezra's car turned right from Covent Avenue into Strand Road, Ezra's car almost hits the Skoda, and then moved into the left-hand side of the road. Perhaps annoyed, the Skoda driver quickly overtakes the Renault Twingo that is cut across him. The Skoda driver dangerously overtakes the Renault Twingo to the right. For a brief few seconds, the Twingo seems to try to go bumper to bumper with the Skoda. Now, I should mention...
Nick, sorry to interrupt you.
Okay.
I was going to say, that's some manoeuvre to be doing in a big lump of a Skoda. And both of us learned that this traffic system is a one-way system here. Yeah. So along the Strand Road. So yes, maybe the driver attempted it because he or she or whoever was in the Skoda knew that there wouldn't be oncoming traffic coming the other side. But it's still a dangerous manoeuvre. And I'll tell you, whether it was Ezra coming from the Covent Road onto the Strand Road, onto that one-way system, whether that was a dangerous manoeuvre, by God, that was an even more dangerous manoeuvre to have done. So whoever's driving that car wasn't too unimpressed at being cut up. I do have footage of this proper moving CCTV footage, so we're going to go to that shortly. But first, the more closer analysis of this time period will reveal that Twingo, when it first arrived at Covent Avenue, the Strand Road, at least on the CCTV footage, made 2 attempts to park in the Strand car park. Entering, leaving, exiting, and then re-entering again. Essentially, it appeared to do, possibly considering going into the car park, coming back out and circumnavigating back around the one-way system before finally parking at the far end of the car park out of CCTV footage range. Let's take a look at that CCTV footage now. Despite numerous appeals, the driver of the Skoda never comes forward. Ezra's car pulled up at the Bray Head car park at 8:40 a.m.
it's not known who exited the vehicle because CC footage does not focus fully on the car park space where the Twingo is until 10 a.m. So essentially the area is on what's called a Garda monitored swinging camera. It swings over, it focuses on one area for sometimes lengthy periods of time, unless for some reason Garda instruct and control the camera back to another area. Now, the poor grainy footage does not indicate on the Strand Road how many occupants were in the Twingo, other than somebody is clearly driving the car. It's not driving itself. Additional CCTV footage will also come to light. I believe that was from the Star Amusements outlet that was closer to, and their cameras were more focused on the car park area in that Garda camera's blind spot. So we're going to take a look at the footage of where the actual car was parked in the initial blind spot in the Strand car park. CCTV footage in the area at the time focused on different areas, different times. The camera moved around, so there was no footage of anybody getting out of the car. Footage shows a woman, and this is, we actually discovered this is later that morning, this is around 10 to 11 a.m, shows a woman moving up towards Braehead, away from the car park. She stops a number of times, she's looking back, stops, walks on, stops, walks on. Berna, Ezra's sister, doesn't agree with the Gardaí who claimed this might be Ezra. She doesn't believe that the woman in the video is her sister because it appears to her, and I think when you see this CCTV footage you'll probably likely agree, that the woman appears to be looking back at her own dog. Ezra didn't have a dog. She also believes the woman in the video is a different size and height to Ezra. So let's just take a look at that CCTV footage. But just to say, this is the footage that the initial lead Garda inspector tried to suggest was Ezra. I think most people will make a conclusion from that footage that was not Ezra. Kieran?
Yeah, no, just looking at it there, I was just trying to see if there's anywhere you could get like kind of a point of reference that you could judge the person's height. But I don't really see anything.
I think it's very hard. I think the fact that we've got the presence of a dog, we know Ezra didn't have a dog. Yeah. You know.
Listen, I remember actually watching the CCTV at the time. That video, I think it was on Crime Call, and like it's clearly.
Wait, hang on a second, lads. Are you not seeing what the other million people watching this program are seeing? Yeah, on Crime Call. Yeah, it's like. Come on, you know. The fact
it's that what time between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m.
We believe the CCTV footage is around 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. So there's a gap there. Then what's she been doing from 8:40, sitting in the car from 8:40 till 10 to 11?
That's the only argument you could offer, but it's unlikely.
Yeah, no, it's unlikely. Okay, so we push on through this day of Wednesday, February the 23rd. Between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m, Esra Uyrun has still not returned home. Her husband spends the day contacting police on numerous occasions. He reports that he is told to just sit and wait for her arrival and that there's probably a more innocent explanation. And yet, again, we've seen this in so many cases that unless he is sure something like a crime has been committed, there's nothing they can do for now but just hopefully await her return. It'll all work out. Now, from the afternoon through to the evening, Ozgur Uyrun has been in contact with police all that day, several occasions throughout the day. He starts to contact relatives in London by the early evening, in the hope that some of them have heard from Esra. No one has heard from her at the London family home. He has contacted her mother, he's spoken to her brother, and when Berna finds out that Ozgur has been contacting the mother and the brother and relatives. She phones him and says, "Hey, what on earth's going on?" He explains to her his frustration dealing with the Irish police, and he doesn't know what's going on, and what's going to happen tomorrow, that Thursday, with Esra's mother and his mother travelling. Berna tells him to send the Garda that he's dealing with a picture of their family car and the registration of the car. Phone them, send it to them somehow. He does that, and now for the first time, Gardaí, maybe for that first time, they have something of more substance that they start checking.
Yeah, Mick, I was going to say, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, okay.
The sister Berna, she really is on the ball. She should be working for the police.
Yeah, she was relentless in this case. Absolutely relentless. She certainly kept the Gardaí on their toes. What you're looking at here, that's an image of the not her, but a Renault Twingo. It's just for library purposes, so you can see the size of car. We're going to talk about this car very shortly and a bit more about the details of it. You can see it's a small two-door car. Okay, now we're into a crucial, I suppose, the first break in the missing person case. 10 to 11 p.m. Gardaí begin running checks on a Renault Twingo registration 08D, that's a Dublin registration, 23067, and plate tracking. And reports reveal an abandoned car with that registration parked off the Strand Road in the car park. Look, I can't answer why Gardaí didn't, maybe at an earlier stage, ask the husband, what's her car registration? We'll run a check on it. Why it seems to be only later that was done, or whether it's just simply that, yeah, the car was only finally picked up later by Garda registration tracking. I have a suspicion this was more like a report by a member of the public or just a normal passing Gardaí aware that this registration was being flagged up to look out for and spotted this car, and that's when they moved in. Later we also find out between 10 and 11 p.m. using telecommunications tracking and her network, Esra's network phone provider, a last phone ping to the Brayhead communications tower will be tracked, and that was at 10 p.m. so that's 1 hour before the car is found. Nothing after that. Now, by the way, the car, we pretty much know, hasn't moved since 8:40 a.m. that morning. At 11 p.m, local Gardaí in Bray secure and examine Esra's car in the car park. The news is communicated to Ozgur and Berna and the family in London. That image you're looking at there, down in the bottom corner, you might make out an X and the word car. That's the area where the car park was on the map. This is not the most professional map to be shown a relative, but this is a map that was shown to Berna during the explanation as to why the Gardaí believed that this might be a suicide case. Where you see that pen pointing is the actual general rough area of the where they believe the phone was as picked up by the Greystone's mast, and it's effectively some way from where the actual car was. Now I just want to emphasize that when I do these timelines, please note that when I put in specific details day to day, hour to hour in a timeline, it doesn't necessarily mean that all of the information I'm putting in at that relevant timeline day was known exactly at that time.
It's all retrospective.
Yeah, it's a lot of this information that I put in the timeline is, we know this now and this is what was actually really happening then, but we have to use 2020 hindsight. A lot of these details weren't known specifically at the time, where we might not go, oh, why didn't they do this or why didn't they do that? It wasn't known then.
On the evening of the 23rd of February, Esra's husband Ozgur called Berna to tell her that Esra hadn't come home from a shopping trip in the morning and that he believed she was missing.
He actually called my mum's house first to say, had anyone heard from Esra today? Because it got to a stage where he had to speak to somebody, because mum's was due to fly out the next morning. And then he spoke to my brother to say, look, I'm getting really worried here. She left this morning. She was only supposed to go to the shop and come back while I got ready for work. So my brother literally said, well, why have you waited so long? And he said, well, I didn't want to worry anybody, thinking like she might come back. And then I called the police and they said, I have to wait.
Berna called Ozgur immediately to try and find out what was going on.
That's when he explained to me, he said, it was a normal morning. He goes, we all got up, I was just plotting around and I mentioned I wanted to go to the gym that day, that I was going to take the car for the day. And Esra just turned around and said, well, if you're going to take the car, it's cold. I don't want to go out with the baby on. So I'll just go and pick up a few bits I need and I'll come back, you have the car, and then I don't have to go out again.
Berna told Ozgur to go back to the police with a picture of Esra and the car registration number. She wanted to help the police in any way possible to track down her sister. She was frantic, panicked. Nothing had ever felt more urgent. And then the police made a breakthrough.
They came back about 11 o'clock at night saying the car was parked in Bray. I just literally packed a bag, went to see my mum obviously to make sure she was okay because she was just in a total state when she heard. And then my brother took me to the airport and I met up with Ozgur's mum and we flew over there and we were there Thursday morning.
When she arrived, the police immediately told Berna that they believed Esra had committed suicide.
February the 24th, Thursday. This should have been very much the best day of the year for Esra. This was the day Esra's mother and mother-in-law were meant to be flying into Dublin for a visit to see their daughter and celebrate her forthcoming birthday. But a great deal, as we know now, has happened overnight. The nature of that trip has completely changed in the space of 12 hours. This is a family in turmoil, confused and trying to come together, knowing something is very wrong. Esra's mother is still travelling, but Berna has now taken the place of the mother-in-law. They've switched tickets. Esra's brother drives his sister and mother to the airport in London. They arrive in the Dublin airport still struggling to come to terms with what is unfolding, there to support Ozgur and his son and figure out where Esra is. Of course, they do ask Ozgur why he waited so long after she didn't return home at 8 a.m. that morning. He tells them that he didn't want to worry them so early in the day about his concern and frustrations with the initial Garda's response that afternoon he was getting. So Garda's search Esra's Renault Twingo they have recovered in a Bray-Strand car park. The only fingerprints found in the car belong to Esra and Ozgur. Esra's purse, which is quite a small purse, for coins, notes, cards, bank cards, is oddly found in the boot of the car. They also find €60 in cash, credit cards. Following checks and searches at the home by Gardaí and family members, Esra's bank accounts show no activity on the day of her disappearance or thereafter. Her passport is also located at her Clondalkin home. Kieran, your thoughts, I think, here. By the way, this is another library photo of a Renault Twingo. It's not the Renault Twingo of Ersa's.
No, just that it's a very small car, and just I remember before we started that you pointed out to me that it actually would be a very good car for an abductor, disturbingly, because it's so small.
It's small.
Yeah.
It's a two-door car. If, for whatever reason, whatever purpose, whatever intention, you are in the back of that car, you cannot exit that car. You can't even exit that car if the car stopped, because there's no rear doors for the passengers to get out. It requires the front doors opening and the seats to be pushed forward to allow access and exit. Now, obviously, if we're looking at the situation of, you know, an abduction, you do sort of think, well, that's quite viable if the person in the back is in some way subdued. The issue, I would say, with the purse, I know people have said, why would you open the back hatchback of this small car and just put your purse, or some other person put Esra's purse in the back? Actually, I see a number of ways that purse may have got there, because there's no actual separating wall or structure between the very small back boot and the seats in the rear of the car.
Yeah, and like you see there, the seats, Mick, something could fall in between them.
Is it possible that the purse was on the seat and slipped back and fell down and somehow ended up in this bay area, this bottom bay area? That's a possibility. You know, if there was a struggle, she was subdued, or it came unattached from loose from her, fell out of her pocket. And you know, that's also another way it could have got there.
There's no kind of, like, you know, shelf thing or whatever, like, you know, from the boot, like, you know, at the back behind the seats.
Yes, and also there's none of those how do you say it? Like when you pull down a hatchback boot. Yeah, there's also another top, thing you often see people put boxes of tissues on it, or there's no separator. There are no separators between the boot and the back of that passenger car. So I suppose the other more, unpleasant thing is... I
suppose it's safe to say there's a few ways the purse could have got into the boot.
Yeah. And the more, difficult and unpleasant thing is, a body in the boot. Is that really the kind of space, to be able to place a body or a subdued person in that boot? I don't know. Look, let's leave it to viewers to make their own mind up there, but I think it's relevant for us to examine that kind of detail.
Yeah.
We're moving between February the 24th and February the 25th. This is the Thursday, Friday. Gardaí begin processing the information they have and interviewing family members directly and by phone. They're trying to build a picture of what is known, and tentative searches begin. But it's not until the weekend that really it's all ramped up, and significant resources for a search begin in Clondalkin, and particularly in the Bray area, seaside area. These searches include Gardaí, mountain rescue teams, family and volunteers, and also some charity organisations helping out. Berna will state many times to Gardaí and at media appearances that Esra had shown no signs of depression or plans to take her life or flee in the days before her disappearance. However, it becomes very clear that suicide and misadventure become the main working Gardaí theories in the case. During investigations with family members, Ozgur does mention that the family have previously visited the Bray area for days out, and this only seems to maybe reinforce the Gardaí lead investigator's belief that he's dealing with, well, a suicide. February-March 2011. Continued searches are carried out using a helicopter, mountain rescue, Garda search teams. Volunteers and locals also help out, but nothing is found. The search concentration remains in the Bray and nearby Greystones areas. I've detailed the initial searches for Esra over the following months, and the appeals will be made through the media. Berna Fiden, her elder sister, after spending many weeks in Ireland, finally returns home to London without any real answers. Despite the CCTV footage, location of the car, and the final phone communications ping, the initial investigation lead by a prominent and respected Garda investigator continues to pursue the suicide route. This line of investigation will pretty much last for almost 3 years. To quote Berna in an interview with the media, It wasn't until sunlight after she went missing that there was any kind of search, and then just 5 people showed up in hiking gear and spent a few hours searching around Braehead. I know my sister was not involved in anything online, as she was very open. She would give me her passwords to mind. The only thing she looked at was fashion. The police went through her computer and found nothing. I don't really want to go into too much detail because I don't want to give it oxygen. There was an online theory, shall we say, in the early days, so, and it grew some legs, that somehow her previous job and her husband's job, and the fact that Sporting Bet were going through investigations in Turkey, somehow coincided and was linked to this case. Again, I don't want to give it too much legs. I've looked at it. I've heard all sorts of accusations that the husband and her were indicted for fraud and all sorts of goings on. I have checked and I can find no evidence of any such thing. This seems to be one of those classic conspiracy theories that people put 2 and 2 together and got 5 and somehow linked it with this case. Yeah.
Even by the standards of conspiracy theories, that's bad.
Yeah.
But I was just going to clear up actually one other conspiracy theory was on the topic. One Larry Murphy was definitely not in Ireland at this time. He had well been ran out of the country by then, so we can eliminate him from this one.
Which is, as you both, as we both know, every time we cover a woman missing in Ireland, Laddie Murphy. Yeah, okay. Look, have you done any checks?
No.
We do.
Anyway, he's not exactly inconspicuous. He would have been recognized wherever he went. So, no. Yeah.
So through 2011 into 2012, it will be a while until a new significant piece of evidence comes to light. Well, we're on to one of the most significant details that come to light. The keys, and this isn't the first time we're going to mention these keys. Around December 2011, going into January 2012, we're approaching the first anniversary of Esra's disappearance. Now, on a regular campaign visit to search and find out what's happened to her sister, Berna, accompanied by her daughter, Ada, there seems a final break in the case. Berna is approached by a retail business owner while she's in the area of Nielstown, Clondalkin, putting up posters. You remember we spoke about an area, a row of 8 shops, that early morning shop that opened where Esra was driving to pick up milk and a few bits and pieces. This is that area we're talking about. The owner of the shop, it's actually a shop called McCarthy's. They I think it's
in the picture,
like
Mick,
it's a cafe and it's a chipper essentially. He reveals that a set of car keys was found in his premises some months before, left on the chip shop counter, and that the keys have been hanging on a key rack unclaimed. Later, unclaimed, they were moved, and then he placed them in a can in his office. Can, I presume, on his desk, his office desk. They were held there until the owner reclaimed them. But her poster, Esra's campaign posters, and Berna's visit reminded him to pull them out, and he realises, looking at the pictures on the key rings, the images of the husband and the young son, he had previously hoped that Berna would return and he could give the keys to her. Now, I know there's a bit going on here. This is the picture that Kieran's referring to. This is that Nielstown shopping centre. I believe this is a little bit later than the timeline, but essentially it's not dramatically changed. To the left, you're seeing McCarthy's. That is the chipper. And just to clarify, my understanding is where you see that, I don't know whether the shop was named this at the time, Kevin's, I think it's Kevin's Day, early shop opening, you know, any hours you want to come in kind of thing. That, our understanding, is where Esra was heading that morning at 7:20 when she left Collinstown Grove. It is unclear quite why the owner and his staff, on first finding the car keyring left on a counter one day in the chipper earlier that year, didn't previously make the connection and hand them into Gardaí in the first instance when this whole case came about. Now, we can only surmise the thought process here. That in the first days and weeks of the keys being left on the chipper counter top, staff presumed the rightful owner would just simply return and ask for them. That they lost keys. Have anybody seen keys? That I dropped them here? That I leave them here? And as the weeks and months went by, hung up in the chipper, they just got forgotten about by staff. And that somehow Berna's visits triggered something with the shop owner. And he took out the keys, looked at them and said, my God, that's the woman, or that's the family of the woman that's missing. Esra had been a regular customer at the chip shop. She was well known customer. We know that Esra had lost a set of car keys, and I want to stress here, they had two sets of car keys. Husband had his, Esra had hers. It was Esra's set of car keys that were lost, we believe around July, August 2010. It's not certain exactly when, but Berna believes the keys found in the shop were not those ones, were not the original set of keys that Esra owned and originally lost. Unfortunately, because it's the first thing people would say, well, where's the CCTV footage? Why didn't the staff check that out of who left them on the counter? Because this has been such a long time. Unfortunately, that footage was deleted. I think it's clear at the time. A local chipper, somebody leaves the keys on the counter. It's a local chipper. They're busy. They take the keys. We'll hang them up there. They're put away. They expect to be reminded of somebody walking in 5 minutes later, 20 minutes later, the following day saying, oi, you know, you didn't find a set of keys in here yesterday. They're my car keys. The other thing that Berna has rightly mentioned is they were Esra's personal set of keys to the car. If they were the older set of keys that she lost, it doesn't make sense that when she lost them, why on earth, in going to the car and going to take out your keys and get into the car, you go, oh my God, where's my keys? You would immediately track back, I've just come out of the chipper, or I went into that shop, or I was here. You would immediately go back to those places and ask. And that hasn't happened. And
one thing, Mick, I was just wondering, you know, when she got the new car key, would they back then would they have been able to cancel the old car key?
It wasn't a new car key. My understanding is they had two sets of keys. The husband had his set because they share the car, and she had her set. It was her original set of keys that got lost. So thereon, they both shared the same set of keys, which was Ozgur's set of keys. Berna says, I remember I was shaking after being handed the keys. This is when she eventually was handed back the keys.
Yeah,
and it was so disappointing that nothing came of it. Yeah, a very big shock. And she also says that Esra had qualifying that she had lost one set of keys months before she disappeared, but she'd lost them in the shop. Surely she would have retraced her steps, found them, because she had not been able to use the car to get home. Of course, critical detail. Esra and Ozgur shares the set of keys after that, and I think the keys found in the shop could be the keys used to take the car to Bray. That's her thinking, and I get and I understand why she thinks that way. I don't know, Kieran, your thoughts?
As you said, sorry, as you said at the start, there's a lot going on there. Like, did someone
Mm.
bring the keys back in a
Yeah, yeah.
plan sort
We,
of thing?
we'll
Or,
we'll
you
talk. We'll
can go
talk.
down a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah.
avenues
When we
there.
analyze this, we'll talk about that a little bit more, because that was the other thinking in my mind. Is there some local connection here? Is this whole braid thing something else? We'll talk about
Yeah.
that a little bit
And
more in
then
our
also,
analysis and conclusion. Go
you
on.
know the way you were saying that the owner, when he realized with the posters that that's when he noticed the keys, something triggered in his
Yeah,
mind. But if you said that Ezra, right, just say it, just to eliminate the first set of keys that were lost, you said she went to the chipper regularly in the shops. So her going to the chipper, would that not have triggered him then before that he, oh, it's her keys, there she is in the shop.
yeah, it should have, but I don't
So that
know.
would kind of mean that would be a good way to eliminate that. It's not the set of keys she'd actually lost
Yeah,
once before.
I don't know.
She came back to the
He's
shop.
the owner. Is he regularly serving? Again, it's all very odd. The whole circumstances around
Any
it.
chipper owners I know, they work in the chipper.
They work
Like,
in the chipper
God.
all the time. They never seem to
Yeah,
sleep, or
no.
are never out of it. And they
Despite how
know,
much money they make, they're in there.
and
Yeah.
they know everybody who comes in. They know
Yeah.
they know half their customers by first name. Yeah, it seems odd that it took this long. Yeah. Look, that's all we can say. Everybody can make up their own minds about it. 2012, reflecting on 2012 to 2023. By 2012, Ezra's husband and son, Emin, moved back to the UK for family support. He did participate in a number of early appeals and a later Channel 4 missing documentary. For the most part, it's Berna Foyden, the elder sister, who has driven the media campaign for information on her sister's disappearance over the past 10 to 12 years. But just for everybody who thinks the husband hid under a stone the day his wife disappeared, here is Ozgur talking to the media, and I can assure you, it's not the only appearance that he made. He did make other appearances, but this was the most, what I would call the most highbrow appearance. Now, there have been multiple Garda appeals and reviews of this case since 2011. The case was featured in that Channel 4 documentary I've just shown you. There has been anniversary news appeals, and there's also been, I'm aware of, 2 significant reviews by the GSCR team. That's the Garda Serious Crime Review team. There might have been one in 2015, 2018, and it was looked at again in 2022. This also included, I think, in 2018, an RTE crime call feature. I think we reflected on that, the part earlier when we spoke about the woman with the dog. That was that particular feature that night that was broadcast nationally in Ireland. Despite requests from Berna, the case remains officially classified as a missing person case. It is yet to be upgraded to a murder crime, which Berna would like to see done. It potentially provides more resources for the case, but there has to be a high level of probability that an abduction or murder actually occurred for that to happen. To the best of my knowledge and updates from Gardaí, I'm not aware that this case has ever been directly submitted to the Gardaí's independent cold case team for recommendation and reviews. I suppose the way you classify it is, you have the localised Gardaí team, you've got the Gardaí central headquartered team, you then have the GSCR team who regularly review, on yearly basis, several yearly basis cases. And then if you've got a case that is a cold case for like year, that often goes externally outside Gardaí to a dedicated cold case team. That cold case team may, and sometimes does include ex-Gardaí, retired Gardaí, inspectors, detectives. It includes what we call crackers or profilers, psychological experts, behavioural experts, that kind of thing. It's a whole higher level. But at the moment, this case has barely even met the GSCR standard of case that we need to change the status of this case from missing person to murder. That then frees up extra resources. So this case appears to be still stuck in between a localised Bray Clondalkin Gardaí investigation case and with the potential for the GSCR team to move it to a higher level, having reviewed it.
Nick, sorry not to be too negative, but like in Ireland, like it took 30 years for the Annie McCarrick case to be upgraded to murder.
It took
and I think
40 odd years for Nora Sheeran to reach a prosecution, so these cases don't go away.
No,
and the status can't change.
Upgraded as well.
Yeah, a long time.
Hopefully
and often it's at the request of relatives that the Gardaí finally give in and say, okay, maybe this case should have been upgraded. But I do appreciate that it's a serious decision for Gardaí to upgrade a case from a missing person to a murder without actual evidence that means that, it can be or it should be. Okay, let's move to our analysis on conclusions. This is a complex case. There is a history and several nuances to it, not easily explained. I'm also not convinced that we're seeing quite the true picture of this case presented to the public. What do I mean by that? I suppose in essence, we only know what we know or is publicly released. What I'm most interested in finding is the shortfalls in the initial investigation, what can be proven and not speculated based on evidence, and what can be possible and what is less likely to be so. It's not easy, but we have to ask the question, and the family have asked the question. They've answered it. This is now our point where we give our thoughts and answer the possibility. Could Esra have committed suicide? It has to be asked, and I cannot exclude this possibility. I can in many other cases that Kieran and I have dealt with. I have to weigh the actual known evidence and where it might point on probability. I have to make sure I don't get caught up in, well, he or she wouldn't have done that, based just on family reports. That's not evidence. I'm conscious of a more recent case, like Bernadette Connolly, that ultimately didn't end as it was suspected to be an abduction case. So my approach here is to look at what is known and proven evidence and anything there to discount this possibility, suicide. No single piece of evidence can do that. It has to be a combination of evidences that suggest something very different. I think the biggest failure of the initial Garda investigation that we had one senior detective only looking for evidence to support such a scenario. That's not how it works. You eliminate possibilities. You don't look to support a theory and then work backwards, only looking for the things to support that theory. This case suffered from that, and to a degree still suffers from that. But we still have to start somewhere. Now, despite Berna's magnificent efforts in keeping the disappearance of her sister as a high-profile case in Ireland, her dogged persistence with An Garda Síochána and the investigation teams, I still understand why the initial investigation team held an outcome of suicide as far more likely. Factual-based investigations cannot operate alone in a void of just family bonds and emotions. She couldn't and wouldn't have done that because of X, Y or Z. I've heard all those awful pronouncements and words in too many cases where tragically the outcome is indeed suicide, and the blow is doubly and utterly devastating to the loved ones. The investigation team had no body to examine. Esra Uyrun has never been found. all physical and electronic evidence led them to Braehead. No evidence was ever discovered that identified any abduction or crime taking place. Ezra was familiar with the Braehead area. Ezra had taken the death of her father a little harder than maybe some of the other family members, and the death was relatively recent, October 2010, though it had not been unexpected after many years of her father's very poor health. Ezra had experienced many life changes in relatively few short years, moving country, away from family, job circumstances, house living circumstances, bereavement, new friends, new social circles, new motherhood, and all the responsibilities that go with that. Throughout the case across 12 years, we have primarily relied on Berna, her sister, living in the UK and after the disappearance, to build a picture of Ezra's life and circumstances. That is, in essence, the only actual picture we have of Esra Uyrun. There was a reason why I felt the Podimo podcast that Pandora Sykes did was important, because it gave, I believe, a better glimmer into the honesty of Berna, and she was more frank about the difficulties her sister had during those 4 years when she moved to Ireland. And it's something that doesn't come out in an awful lot of more general mass media accounts of this case. Is this the truest and clearest picture of Ezra's life? I'm pretty sure investigators in this case asked the same question countless times over the years. One element struck me in this case, very early on in the case, when Berna, her sister, during our campaigns and countless visits to Dublin and the areas of Bray and Clondalkin, she learned that her sister had actually lived at the Aspect Hotel in Park West when she first relocated to Dublin. She seemed surprised to learn how long Ezra was living in the hotel. And it raised a question for me, and that was exactly how much was Ezra really telling her older sister about her circumstances initially when she came to Ireland. Sometimes we can learn a lot about a loved one as much by speaking and interacting with their family and friends than we might know at a given time. In other words, Berna, in retrospect, was learning and building a reinforced picture of her sister, the places she went, the things she did, the things she loved to do, the friends and interactions she had after the disappearance, and they were just reinforcing what she believed she knew.
Sorry, that could be why, like, when she did the Podimo interview, it was after a few years that more things had came to light, and her kind of perspective on Ezra's disappearance.
Yeah, and she was in a much more reflective mode.
Yeah.
And let us remember, prior to Ezra's disappearance, it was Esra herself who was doing most of the travelling from Dublin to her Turkish family in the UK. It wasn't so much the other way around. In fact, the visit of the two mothers, the mother-in-law and Ezra's mother, was, going the other way. And I also wanted to remind you of that Podimo podcast interview that Berna gave. In that Podimo interview, Berna Finan did state that Ezra had struggled with the transition to Ireland initially, and family connections to her Turkish origins were very important to her. She did reveal that Ezra had discussed with her husband, Ozgur, perhaps relocating back to London, and he had requested a job transfer if a position became available. I'm left wondering if by February 2011, when she disappeared, how strong her desire and decision was to move back with Ozgur and Emin to her family in London. It seemed very strong. How much was this playing on her mind? And it was only reinforced by her arranging both mothers to visit her in Dublin, and for as long as they wanted. Of course, there are many reasons to counter the suicide possibility, and we'll look at some of those now. She had made significant plans to host her mother and mother-in-law, booked spas and restaurants for their stay. She was excited, looking forward to it. It seems unthinkable, of all times, she would choose that day before the visit to take her own life. Why choose a time window in the busy working week when her husband would be expecting her immediate return that morning? Would only increase the possibility that people would raise the alert that something was wrong sooner than later and reduce that window of opportunity. Why bring your mobile phone? It's a tracking device. Why the need to secrete a purse in the boot of the car? It's not like it's going to be found there. It's not going to be found there. Why wouldn't Esra choose a time her husband was off work at home, maybe with their son, and invent an excuse to leave the home and not be expected for many hours or later that day? She didn't do that. If Esra was unhappy in her family circumstances and her relationship, why wouldn't she simply take her beloved son Eamon and return to her family home in London? It was there for her, only welcoming her if she wanted to come back. She could have taken her husband to work as normal any day prior, and after bought a pre-arranged and booked flight to London. That's it. Yeah. There is planning in this case, but all of it still seems completely adverse to a planned suicide. If this was a suicide, then it seems more plausible that it was unplanned or some spur of the moment mental crisis or trigger occurred that morning. What it was, we don't know. Kieran, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thanks, Mick. On the suicide thing, I know the way I said I kind of had two possible outcomes, just in my opinion, and one of them was suicide. But like as you laid it out there, if it was suicide, it was definitely just she had some sort of breakdown that morning.
Yeah, it doesn't seem planned. Yeah.
No, and then she did have a 2-year-old son, and I think I know that you're getting statistics here, but statistically, most women who commit suicide, it's at home. Is another thing.
Yeah.
And the more you kind of laid it out there, I'd be more reluctant to go to suicide theory, especially with the person at the back. And then, but one thing I would say on the suicide theory is I actually did the satellite map over Bray Head and kind of went through the area and I know the Coast Guard did go out, but there's loads of little inlets.
Oh yeah, it's known previously as a place where people have made that final decision and have never been found, and it's believed that's where they went. You know, this is a known place for that. Whether that was over the 4 years that Esra was in Dublin, that was conscious in her mind, I'm not so convinced that would have been a thing. And I'm going to commit suicide. I know I must go to Bray. I don't really, that doesn't really figure in my thinking. Whether that happened or it didn't happen, I don't believe that would have sprung to mind. You know, people say, oh Bray, oh yeah, that's suicides, but I don't believe that really plays into this. I don't think it's necessarily relevant to.
Not to bring nationality or whatever into it, but you'd have to be from Dublin to know that.
That's what I'm saying. And she was only really here 4 years. And again, in the earlier part of that possibility, you know, I did say that, you know, she was here, she was living here, but she was only really in relative terms living here a short time. And it seems very clear that in her mind, at least forward planning, she already had the idea in her mind that she was ultimately going to be going back to London. Okay, so what are the other possibilities and probabilities? Well, we have to ask it. Sometimes we go into more detail and less detail when we go into spouses, but are there reasons to raise suspicion of husband Ozgur Uyrun? If Ozgur is directly involved in the harm or disappearance of his wife Esra, then we would have to accept that he has entirely fabricated the circumstances of that morning. We know Esra is alive the previous evening because she is actively using her phone, she's socialising and having a conversation with a neighbour. And how do we account for the neighbourhood couple who witnessed Esra get into her car that morning after 7 a.m? How does he carry out a nefarious deed without a car, and all while parenting a 2.5-year-old son and getting ready for work? His window
the kid,
of opportunity.
That's the vital info.
Yeah. His window of opportunity is minute. 7:20 to 8:40 a.m. to be at Bray Head, and yet he has to leave work at 8 a.m. as normal. The entire scenario seems too elaborate and one that would have raised immediate suspicions with Gardaí investigators and far too many unaccounted loose ends. There's nothing in the early investigation to indicate that Ozgur Uyrun was ever considered a suspect in the disappearance of his wife. As normal, his digital activity and all communications would have been secured and examined before being eliminated as a potential suspect. What might help in this case, if we knew more about the activity and movements of Ozgur that morning, I am certain An Garda Síochána have that information. Whether he called his manager or employer at Sporting Bet and explained that he could not attend work that day, what, if any, communications he attempted throughout that day by phone, text to Esra's mobile. If he contacted anybody to babysit his son and left the home in search of Esra, believing her to be somewhere locally. I always think it's better for a spouse in circumstances like this, difficult as it is, to be public and clear about their activities and behaviour in the time of a family disappearance, and the event that the spotlight and suspicion might come upon them, as has been with this case. It's clear from the outset and intervening years that Esra's family in London on the day of her disappearance were as frustrated with his delay as he was with the Gardaí's response to his concerns throughout that day. I do have one overriding red flag in regards to Ozgur, and it's nothing to do with his wish many months later to return with his son to family in the UK. It's the exchange mentioned between him and Gardaí about where his wife might have possibly gone on the morning of her disappearance. I would like to know when exactly he suggested the possibility that Esra could have went to Bray and the family were familiar with the area on days out. In essence, did he offer this possibility, Bray, before or after Esra's Renault Twingo was found in the Bray Head car park at 11 p.m. on the day of her disappearance, among all his exchanges with Gardaí? Or was it in reaction to the news of the car find? If it was prior to the find of the car, then that does raise serious suspicions that he was withholding the full circumstances of that morning. Was Esra Uyrun abducted by someone known or unknown? We're going to deal with that now. But Kieran, on that, do you want to reflect, yeah?
Yeah. I was just going to say, that thing you're saying with the guards, if they found out he was lying to them or whatever about his movements in the morning, they would have just named him as a suspect, you know, or they would at least said they had a suspect. They've done it in other cases. For example.
I'm pretty certain. I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt, and that whole thing about, you know, did he suggest Bray to them? I think it was probably more likely a reaction to Ozgur, I'm afraid we have found your wife's car, but we can't find her. Where's the car? It's in Bray car park and it's late at night here and she's not here. And it was a reaction to that, and he said, oh my god, the amount of times we've been out in Bray, oh god, you know, what's going on? I think it's more likely a post reaction rather than a prior reaction.
And then like him moving back to London
I
with the
don't.
son
Yeah,
is
I don't
absolutely
really.
nothing. Of course he would do that. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
he's from there, his family's
And
there.
they were
Yeah,
already.
he's not going to stay here,
and we
work a
know.
job.
Yeah, we
raise
know they
kids.
were planning to do that anyway. Yeah.
Oh, mate. Yeah.
Okay, so was Esra Uyrun abducted by someone known or unknown to her? I suppose there's a number of strands to this possibility. One, her intention was to simply pick up some items from the shop at around 7:20 a.m, but she came upon someone with nefarious intentions, unknown to her, and was abducted. Why do we not have a witness or direct evidence of this in Clondalkin? Was Esra's short trip to the local shop some kind of ruse to conceal a planned meeting or intention she was hiding from her husband? And that meeting somehow she knew, and it turned nefarious. Was Esra set up, stalked, and met a tragic end to some obsession or grievance against her? The last one seems the least likely, without any evidence. Kieran, your thoughts?
Yeah, just on that, the answer to this case, I would think, is definitely in between the time she left the house and she showed up, or the car showed up on the camera at the Power City roundabout. There's
the 7:20 to 7:50 timeline.
Yeah, that it has to be in that, like, and because it'd be unlikely that someone could be waiting for her in her car, hiding in her outside her home.
And how do you do that on that stretch of road? That's even back then. That was a busy stretch of road.
Yeah.
You know. Okay, there's been talk about did she. Yeah, you go through all the scenarios. Did she pull over for somebody, you know, to help in need? Somebody got a puncture.
Yeah.
I don't think a single woman on her own popping out to the shops who needs to get back for her husband to get to work is going to go, oh, that's unfortunate, poor guy there, he's broken down or he's had a puncture, I'll stop for him. No, that's not going to happen. That doesn't. Was there an accident or somebody flagged her down? Other motorists would have seen that and noted it, but that's
it would have to be something very quick. But actually, like, someone that lured her though would seem the most likely. But
a meeting of some kind, something concealed or unknown that she's meeting. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, she is from London, like, so, and she was, I think, 38, so she'd have her wits
38,
about her.
almost a week later, she would have been 39.
Yeah, so she'd have her wits about her, you know.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
But, you know,
okay,
so hard to tell.
Yeah.
But the thing in Bray is it's just, to me, it's like so strange. The car, and then with the car and the Skoda, and then the fact the car circled around Bray.
Yeah, like, and came back, went in and came back out again. Yeah. It does seem.
What's going on with that? Like,
yeah, it does seem very, 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 very strange.
That would point to an abductor, and that when they first seen the car park, they were going to ditch the car or whatever, and then there's something in the car park that either they knew someone was there, someone they knew, a guard, whatever it may be, and they decided to circle back.
But you're traversing down alleyways that are all so complex and odd.
And then that's before you get to the actual mobile phone ping.
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't take that long to walk from Bray to Greystones.
Yeah.
From whatever 9 a.m.
Yeah. Oh. Okay, so let's move to our final thoughts here. Okay, well, look, you'll hear from Kieran. I'll give mine. Without knowing the answers to the two following questions, it's hard to decide on the most probable outcome of this case. I suppose the two biggest questions, at least for me, will be who was driving the Renault Twingo between Clondalkin out to Bray Strand between 8:20 and 8:40 a.m. on the morning of February 23rd, 2010. Sorry, that probably should read 7:20 to 8:40. Who left the keys on the counter of McCarthy's chipper many months after Esra's disappearance? Was it her? Was it genuinely the original keys that she'd lost? Or, as Berna, her sister, suggests, no, there was something a bit more untowards. Was this a local who was or someone passing through who was handing in the keys from the incident and disappearance itself. If it is, that's a lot more strange and would suggest a more localized and direct influence and nefarious influence on this case. If this is the case of an abduction and nefarious intentions and Esra met a tragic end, I'm inclined to believe both of the above were carefully planned decoys. That is, the keys and the car out of Bray. I'm also struggling with the curiosity that Esra's last phone ping is 1 hour before her car is located at Brayhead car park at 11 p.m. What exactly were the events and exchanges with Esra's family that led Gardaí to the specific spot once matters were escalated, when throughout the day they had seemed somewhat uninterested and she would just turn up back home and her husband should just wait and see what unfolded? The phone, the last ping, and the car. We know the last ping was at 10 p.m. off the Brayhead mast. My best guess is that this is when the phone battery exhausted, rather than when it was turned off by Esra or someone else. There has been a lot of focus on the Renault Twingo, understandably. What we do know is what telecom masts was that phone pinging off before it got to Brayhead. Before location pings, what log activity did it record throughout the day? How many calls and messages were logged through the network provider from Ozgur and Esra's family and friends throughout that day when she couldn't be contacted? Each one created a ping in the log, Kieran.
Yeah, if the car took, did it went out onto the M50, were you saying, the motorway?
I believe that's the route it's believed to have taken to get to Bray.
But then there has to be CCTV on the M50 as well. But I can't, I'd be shocked if there's not, right?
I don't know back then. I assume at the, well, is there a toll booth to get to Bray? There isn't a toll booth to get to Bray. So it's probably the registration tracking that the Gardaí were gathering. But that's all they have. Yeah. If it was a toll booth, then yes, we would have camera. We would have camera tracking. But I think that's probably why we're missing direct CCTV footage of the car as it actually travelled. I think we're just dealing with tracking. There is tracking.
Actually there's a guy called Shane Phelan. I think he has a channel called I think it's like Horror Era. Sorry if I got that wrong.
Haunted Era collection. Yeah.
Yeah, he actually did an episode about Esra's case, and what he does that is actually quite good is he does the episode in his car, so he'll drive to
he reenacts that moving through the Power City roundabout from her home location and then out onto the motorway and out to Bray. And he actually is very, in fairness to Shane, he's very familiar. He's from the Bray area, so he knows that area like the back of his hand.
He pointed out on the M50, like there's you could actually go to, like he said, Fear House, and within about 5 minutes you're into the wilderness.
You can head into the mountains. Yeah.
And then you're not so far from Feather Beds, which is up in the Dublin mountains where many bodies have been found, and make it back to Bray. He did the timeline like it fitted, you know. So say.
But that seems to me
it's all theoretical.
With you know, subduing someone, let's be blunt, doing away with someone, secreting a body, could that all be done and get to Bray? You know, the timeline of just driving between those areas, but it's all the practicalities, the sordid practicalities in between that makes it a little bit more difficult.
It would have to. The only way it would kind of fit would be if somebody abducted her when she left her house and unfortunately killed her, and then
if it happened then, that seems the more likely. And as I say, the car, the keys, all of that stuff was just decoys. I certainly don't believe that Esra Uyrun was wandering around Bray from 8:40 a.m. that morning until her phone registered its last ping location at 10 p.m. The phone was there, her car was there, but was Esra? I find it hard to believe she was there without public eyewitnesses and for nearly 14 hours. That in some sort of escaped turmoil, she ignored all the countless messages and missed calls she was getting. For me, there are only two final scenarios left. Esra, for whatever reasons, planned or not, on the morning of February 23rd, drove from Clondalkin to Braehead and tragically ended her life soon after arriving, as was the early Gardaí working theory. Despite all the other case contradictions, she would not be the first or last, sadly, to disappear off Braehead, and a body was never recovered. Or two, Esra Uyrun was never in Bray that day. The keys left in the chipper months after, the car journey out there, the phone dumped and lost in Bray were all decoys to present the inference and evidence that Esra went there to take her own life, and that Esra met her end sometime soon after she left home in Clondalkin, and that a predator or abductor has somehow managed to elude discovery. Kieran, our last words before we close out.
No, that's a great work, Mick, with the timeline, and I think really you've covered everything in the case, and just hopefully with the case not being that long ago, 12 years, and
yeah, it's not hugely long, and we still await if that CCTV footage can be enhanced. I mean, sometimes technology can work miracles, but yeah, from what we've seen, I'm not so hopeful that we're really going to. And
to be honest, the main hope for me would lie with the sister, Berna. She's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, she's incredible.
Fair play to her. So as long as she's there, there's definitely hope.
Yeah, this case ain't going away.
Yeah, if she's there,
If Berna ain't going away with this case, we ain't going away, and we'll cover it if there's any updates. That's it for episode 36 of Radio Espial, and thank you for joining me, Kieran. God bless everyone, and we'll see you all again, hopefully very soon and very healthy.
Thanks, Mick.